In this video, I wanted to go ahead and give you guys a performance report on the TP9DA. Now, the TP9DA is not the most popular model out there right now as in America. It would be the SF or the SF Elite. The DA is more of, I guess you could say, the most current basic copy, I guess you could say, of the Walther P99. So you have your double action and single action capability, and it's a double action, single action, but it can be started either way. It can be decocked after loading, and it's only on one side. I'm not really sure why. I thought it was okay to have it on both sides, giving it kind of that ambidextrous quality, but then you can also just have it cocked and the trigger will already be forward like this, and then you pull the trigger and then it's ready to go. So anyways, it has options to it, I guess you could say, as far as the trigger pull is concerned. So I think it's a great pistol all around for those that are new. You could either go the double action route for more safety, or you could just go the single action route, or however you want. I typically stick with the double action, but anyways, since I've had this pistol, I've made a few changes to it, and the first thing is basically the front sight. And really, this is the only change. I don't know why I said a few changes, but the front sight I painted with a little pink nail polish, and this is pretty standard for me to do with my pistols, instead of getting like fiber optic front sights or anything like that. The only other real difference, I guess you could say, is I added a magazine. It was on sale, so I went ahead and picked it up from a local store. So that's really it. I really put this thing through a lot of use because the springs were tight. The recoil spring was tight. The trigger was tight. The springs that deal with that, everything was really tight right off the bat, and it actually still is. After 5,000 rounds and tens of thousands of cyclings and dry firings and stuff like that with snap caps, I am really impressed with how this pistol is held up. I haven't had any malfunctions like failures to feed, extract, eject, or anything like that. Nothing crazy. Now, with that said, the pistol is still kind of a pain in the butt as far as the trigger is concerned, because when I got this pistol, I thought it was going to be, I wasn't actually able to test the trigger and see how it was and test them down the line, because I got it from Cabela's, and Cabela's now locks up all their triggers, and they don't want you taking the trigger lock off, so they were kind of pains in the butt about that. And not that I'm really affected by trigger weight too much, but it was really stiff right when I got it on the double action and even on the single action. The wall was just really heavy. It's uncommon. It kind of threw me off, but it wasn't really detrimental. So I got my trigger pull gauge here, and my technique for this is basically just lightly taking up the little bit of slack on the double action and pulling through. So almost 8 pounds. We'll run it again. 7.5 and 5.5. So it kind of varies however you decide to pull the trigger, and then get a little over 8. So that's pretty consistent for the double action. Now the single action, I'm going to run it from here, and I'm just going to touch it. 612. Touch. 4, 5. So these readings can be kind of awkward depending on where you pull the trigger at. So $4.10, and I'm going to do another one for good measure. 5.7. So it's still pretty stiff as far as the wall is concerned. It's very pronounced, and it doesn't glide like the P99 does. It's just right there and then snap. It's very crisp, so a lot of people will like that, and I actually like it too now that it's lowered a bit in weight, because when I first got this pistol, the double action was anywhere between 8 and 10 pounds depending on how you pulled it on the trigger, and the single action was not far behind. It was literally between 6 and 8 pounds. So it really has improved a bit, and the poundage doesn't really change if you just have it like this, where you have to pull all the way through. I mean, this doesn't really have any weight to it doing this, so it's not really adding to the overall weight on your trigger gauge. So, or your trigger pull gauge, I guess you could say. So, now let's go ahead and talk about the wear on this pistol. Really, there isn't much. This Cerakote is holding up very well. As you can see, I have holstered, unholstered, holstered, drawn, you know, whatever you want to call it. There really isn't much wear at all to show, except for on the corners here, on the outside at least. So, these sights, my one recommendation from doing one-handed manipulations is to actually just push the pistol into whatever material really hard, because this slope actually will cause it to slip. So, yeah, that's one recommendation, but this is kind of a sharpish edge. So, just be careful about what material you're racking it up against. I would not recommend trying to do it against a Kydex holster. It tends to slip or give a little bit, so I didn't really have that great a success with that. Now, the sights themselves, I'm okay with the sights. It's just that with the relatively low sight radius, or short sight radius, it needs to be a little bit more precise. These are definitely combat sights, so here I painted it for speed of acquisition of the sights, and this pistol is capable of incredible precision, and these sights are capable of incredible precision. I don't see it as a detriment. However, you do need to be diligent, because you're working with a little bit of a shorter barrel, and you know, your sight radius isn't as much as it probably could be, I guess you could say, or you could have a thinner front sight that could help you dial it in a little bit better. There's a saying, keep the front sight thin and you're in. But yeah, I don't really see it as much of an issue to get good precision out of this, as long as you are diligent about working with the trigger. Now, a little disclaimer here, when we're talking about triggers, not every trigger is going to be the same. It's not always going to be exactly the same. These springs have remained really tight. When I tried out the SF and the SF Elite, I was blown away by the single action and how hard my single action is, even compared to my P99. It was just ridiculously different. So anyways, next thing I want to talk about is basically the internals. So, the internals is where the real change was, and you got to understand that I did 5,000 rounds of live fire, and I did tens of thousands of rounds dry. And obviously I was using a snap cap, well, not obviously, but I was using a snap cap to protect the striker / firing pin. I don't want to have to call Century Arms to beg for one. So, anyways, with all that said, let's go ahead and disassemble it. And here we go. So we'll start off with the recoil spring. Recoil spring, the only thing that's really worn on there is it's kind of a triangular form, as you can see here. It's only the top part that's really worn there. And it's just Cerakoted, if I understand correctly, but maybe it's parkerized or whatever the finish is on this stuff. It's held up pretty well, but you still feel a little bit of grit every now and then, and that's pretty common, because you're hearing the grit, because you can hear this thing scraping, and that's pretty common. It's going to scrape. That's why it's a recoil spring guide. But yeah, it still has a good amount of tension. It's still very robust. I'm still pretty impressed with how it's done. 5,000 rounds isn't much, but when you're practicing with it constantly, it's a lot more than just taking it out to the range. It's doing work on the recoil spring and the system in general. And I'll tell you this, a lot of this wear on this barrel is mostly from doing dry practice reloads, malfunction clearances and stuff like that. Even though I didn't have malfunctions, you always want to practice them. I love practicing malfunctions, so because it's hard to do and it's a challenge. I like overcoming challenges. But here is the wear. You can see it's held up pretty well, but I do like how this thing has worn. So yeah, there's that. Then on the sides here, it's gotten a little bit of wear, and this is pretty much bone dry. and obviously the camming area here on the barrel. No big deal there. So yeah, the lockup has stayed pretty nice, and no ridiculous wear. And then of course this is where the recoil spring will rub when it's cycling, so no big deal. Now the inside of the barrel, I guess I can go ahead and touch on that. The inside of the barrel, pretty easy to clean, not that hard to do. And the feed ramp, it wasn't polished as much as I think it could have been. It's kind of uneven. It has little specks of finish here and there on both sides, so I don't know who polished this or if it was supposed to be polished, but if I want to get down to attention to detail, it hasn't hurt any function, but if I want to be picky, then I would say that that was kind of a lazy job. But anyways, I don't really care as long as it works right. So Glock barrels are not polished, or Glock feed ramps are not polished. So anyways, here's the inside of the slide. It's done pretty well. The finish, that is. And this is where the disconnector kind of rides right there, or the trigger bar, which kind of acts as the disconnector. So there we go. And my recommendation for the striker system, all you need really is an Allen key in order to get everything out, just like the P99. No special tools really. You just get this out by pushing this part in and sliding this off, getting everything out of there. And then you push this down, push this piece all the way in, and pull this thing out. And everything comes out pretty easily, so no real need for special tools. So that's one thing I do like about this, is copying off the P99, which is a very great design. And then you have this system, which is going to look a little bit different than something you'd see on like the SF or the SF Elite. So when you're actually when you cock the pistol and it's all the way forward and you pull it back like this and it snaps, all that is this side right here basically getting behind this right here. That's all that is. And the striker is actually caught on this one up top. So that little guy is what's catching it. And when you cock it, and then when you decock it, it transfers to this one right here. And that's basically where you're getting your trigger pull at, is it's tugging on the front side of this little wing area. So that's where your double action pull comes from. It goes back and then it goes down out of the way. So pretty simple, pretty safe. So yeah, frame's held up pretty well. No problem with spring tension. Springs are actually still pretty good weight, and not much wear on the camming block right here. Based on my experience with this pistol, I'm pretty happy that I invested in it. It's pretty inexpensive actually. You can get these for about $300, and yes, this is going to be a little bit bigger as far as height compared to like the P99, which would be a little more concealable. You're only getting 15 rounds, but you know, do what you got to do, get what you want to get. But really, this is no higher than a Beretta M9A3 with a full mag, like the full 17 round mag in it. So I don't really see this as being a concealed carry piece necessarily. Maybe in the wintertime here, but typically I pretty much switched all the way to 40 caliber. I know I'm evil, but as far as this pistol goes, I think there's a reason why the Turkish military and the Turkish police have been happy with this. Not necessarily the military as it were, but the defense special operations, which is more the police force, and it's, you know, operating throughout the whole Ministry of Defense. They do a wide variety of counterterrorism, but they do like their TP9 series of pistols, and from what I know, they've kind of jumped through a lot of different designs, but unfortunately I don't think this one actually has any contracts, but it seems to be built to the same specifications. So you're supposedly supposed to have a 50,000 round life of the barrel, and the recoil spring should last a heck of a long time. Because the original Walther design, the original Walther recoil spring was rated for a 9mm NATO and 40 caliber, being about the same. Basically, factory loaded 40 caliber is on the same pressure, in the same pressure area as a 9mm NATO. This thing should last a long time with American, watered down semi-spec crap ammunition. So I imagine you'll get a good service life out of this. Now, get your FDE or black TP9DA. So anyways, go ahead and leave a comment below on your thoughts on the TP9DA. If you have one, go ahead and share your experiences. If you have a TP9DA, we all know how everybody loves the TP9SF, but I want to hear from people that actually have the TP9DA. So anyways, I know there's a lot of fans that love the TP9, and there's a good reason for it. I'll just say that right there. So anyways, thanks a lot for watching, and you guys have a good one.